Hello and welcome to After Scientology, Straight Up and Vertical, the weekly show where Tony Ortega and I go over last week's articles and news items that Tony posted on his Substack. Hey, Tony, welcome back for this week.
Hey, Chris, good to be here, man.
Yeah, good to see you. How are things been going lately? A lot of bike riding. That's awesome.
Yeah, I managed to have another little bicycle vacation, but kept the blog going at the same time. So, using a little mini PC in a hotel sometimes is a bit stressful, but I managed to make it work.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, it sounds like you had a good time. And I actually had some notes and stuff on all the articles last week because there was some pretty interesting stuff. You know, a little from a historical and a little bit from a then and now compare, contrast, you know, a little bit of like looking at how they were, looking at how they are, looking at how some things haven't changed at all. And
Yeah.
I thought, wow, this is really interesting stuff and worth some commentary. First off, modern, you know, current events. Looks like Austin is finally going to open their ideal org this next month.
Well, that's according to city records. Scientology has asked for Guadalupe Street to be shut down between 2 and 3 p.m. on Saturday, August 26th. And that's a big deal. It's a main artery right by UT Austin, and this building has been ready for years, a couple of years at least, and it's because of the pandemic and stuff. So we've just been wondering when they were going to do it, and this is the best indication or actual city records showing that Scientology has asked specifically for this ceremony to happen. The closures are actually going to start 5 days before on certain sidewalks and alleyways, but then the main street they want shut down for a whole hour. And we've seen this before for their ideal org openings in other places. The reason why this one's kind of special is it's been several years since the last one, which was in Ventura, California, and also that it's going to be such a terrible time for an ideal org opening ceremony in Austin, Texas on a Saturday in August. So I looked up the past records, and it's been 95 to 100 degrees every day on August 26th the last 10 years, except for one day when it rained 7 inches. So this is just not a very convenient time. And Miscavige had said at the New Year's event he planned to open 4 new ideal orgs in the first quarter. That means by March 31st. That would have been a much better time to have this ceremony in Austin. So I'm not sure why he's waited so long, and for a time that his followers are going to be wilting in the heat. But hey, they have not. I don't know. I'm trying to think of the last time there was an ideal org opening that Miscavige wasn't personally at. I can only think of one was in Europe. I think Stuttgart he didn't go to. But other than that, he goes to these. So, these process servers that are looking for him, hey, this is where they claim he's going to be, is Saturday, August 26th, Austin, Texas, 2 to 3 p.m. So that's kind of interesting.
Very, very much so, especially because this is the second or third attempt. I mean, there were earlier announcements of earlier openings. Austin, God, there's so many things I could say about this. Austin is an org I have some history with as a manager for Scientology in the Western United States. And Austin was always an org that was a little near and dear to my heart. It was one of these little podunk places, just like Albuquerque or Las Vegas, really a going nowhere kind of situation. That's Scientology Austin. And it always was for all the years that I was overseeing it. Not for lack of trying, it just never really bites there. And Hubbard specifically called for Austin to put their building, since it was right across the street from the university, to really make a go of promoting to the students on the Scientology study tech. And that's supposed to be their big inroad into Austin. And they've never done it. They've never really succeeded at that. And Austin has always been a problem area in trying to get somebody just to run it. And that got me wondering if some of the delays in opening the org have to do with getting executives for the place, because it's kind of interesting that Austin has, at least from my own management experience, always kind of stood out that way. Even back in the 70s, Hubbard had to personally write letters to the guy who was the ED, because he was wanting to go. And Hubbard was like, no, 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 you can't go. And he wrote all,
Wow.
and he gave him this whole rundown. So it's an interesting, it's got an interesting Scientology history, that area.
Well, and two other little data points. One is that in most cases, Scientology abandons its previous org building when it purchases an ideal org.
Yep.
So if you think about places like Seattle and Portland and Phoenix and Chicago and all these other places, they wanted a bigger, better building. And this is one of the rare cases, like in San Diego, where they took the existing org and just like refurbished it, made it, I think, added space or something. But this is the same location they've always been in, is right across the street from the school. So that's interesting that they realized that this location really matters to them, I think.
Yeah.
And so they went ahead and refurbished this particular location.
That's right. Make no mistake, L. Ron Hubbard specifically said that's your ideal location. And that's why they didn't move. They added 2 stories to the building.
So, yeah, so that's clearly a location that's targeting a particular school.
Yep.
So and people there all know it. So I don't know that it's going to have any effect.
No, they're not gonna go over there and get anything done. They never have. And this is an organization that's been around since the 70s. So they've had all the time in the world to go make their inroads into the university, and they have failed.
And then the other thing that's always fun with these ceremonies, Chris, is that not only do we get to see whether Miscavige is going to show up, but then they always try their best to bring in some local luminaries.
Yes.
And it's always really interesting to see who gets roped into that.
That's right.
So, yeah, and I think you're right that the delay probably has to do with staffing.
Yeah.
And, I've already gotten some calls from some local reporters who want to know more about it. I'm trying to explain to them that this is a show they put on for the big donors.
Yeah.
They'll do their best to make it look like it's an active org for about a year, and then it'll just go moribund, just like all the rest.
That's right.
I mean, go back to Seattle now, go back to, Portland now. Take a look at some of these, gleaming Twin Cities, Kansas City. There's nobody in them now. And they're not, bringing in this golden age that Dave has talked about. But for a short time, they'll do their best to make it look like that, at least in Austin.
That's right. I actually had the exact same thought, because I pulled up a picture of their new building, and I gotta say, it's a beautiful building. It's all glass. Yeah. It's, they light it up. They get this very beautiful, photographs of these buildings. And it really is quite a nice looking building. And I thought to myself, the first thing I thought when I looked at it was, I wonder how long it's going to take before they put up those big window wall size curtains.
Yeah.
Over all those windows.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't take them long, before they start hiding. And it was just, I'm sure that's going to be the case, exactly like you said, with, Portland, we've gone by, Seattle, we've gone by, and these places are, I just love the term, and it's so fitting for Austin, ideal morgues. That's, and that's, and they're not really going to change. So,
right.
You also had it. I was so impressed by this. I really, really liked Sunny Pereira's write-up of her growing up as a cadet in the Sea Org. Was a featured article you had this week, and then a response to that. And do you want to talk about that for a second?
Sure. I mean, Sunny's written several really, really good pieces for the Bunker over the years, and she has talked about her childhood and about her mother just sort of dropping her off at the org, and it's what that meant for her relationship with her mother, with her grandparents. She's written about those things before. But I think what she wanted to talk about this time in particular was just what it meant as a second generation Scientologist, having that lack of family bond
Yes.
from the beginning and what it does to you years later. And I just thought it was one of her most impressive pieces of writing because it was very heartfelt. She's got a great writing style, and it just came across as a devastating piece of writing. And I think what she wanted to do is she wanted other second generation Scientologists to understand that your feelings about this are genuine. You may be going through this years after you left Scientology, and it's real. So I was thrilled that she gave me that piece of writing to post in the bunker, and then almost immediately I heard from this other person who it really resonated for them, and um, they just sent me an email describing what they had been through, and I said, "Look, this is great too. Can I post that?" So we just made sure that we took out a few identifying details because this person's not public. And again, I just, I think it's important that these first person narratives get out there so that people understand that, so many people who go through Scientology have this same experience, and that, Scientology, one of the bedrock principles of Scientology really undercuts the whole notion of family and family bond. This idea of being thetans that jumped in a body, and so you don't have any real connection to your quote unquote parents. Yeah, they might be your parents this lifetime, but you might have been their parents 2 lifetimes back. It just all, if you buy into this idea about thetans and bodies, then the whole idea of family is completely undercut. Now, I know there are some strong families in Scientology. I'm not saying this happens to every Scientologist, but what it does is it allows parents, particularly in a certain time, to just drop their kids off at the org and say, well, you were this is you're an ancient body, ancient thetan in a small body. If you're having a hard time struggling, just figure it out because you went through this some previous lifetime. I mean, that's what Sonny was talking about.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for Scientologists to understand that there are real long-term consequences to that. And I'm hoping that I hear from some other people that also want to talk about what they've been through.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you right here and now, I mean, I went through this too. And this is what I really, really appreciated, the follow-up article from a response from one of your other followers, viewers, because Sunny did nail it. And I wanted to actually highlight something about this because she talks about the concept of disorganized attachment. And I'm not going to go to a big seminar about this, but I do want to kind of define this for people because I want to point something out about it. Disorganized attachment develops from a parent's consistent failure to respond appropriately to their child's distress. That's how it's defined. Or by a parent's inconsistent responses to their child's feelings of fear or distress. For example, being left with a babysitter, not understanding what the hell's going on. That's going to mess with a kid. But you do that for weeks and months and years. And here we talk about with cults, how they are always dialing everything up to 11. Even this whole disorganized attachment thing, what kids experience in the Sea Org and in Scientology by any Scientology parent almost uniformly across the boards is neglect, is this sort of this sort of detachment from the child because of this concept. Oh, he's really an independent little entity and he really doesn't need me that much. And so therefore, and there's all these calculations that happen with Scientology parents. And we've seen Ian Rafalco talked about this with his upbringing. And so many people I've interviewed on my channel and that you have interviewed have talked about this. So it's always worse than you think. Even the experience of disorganized attachment in the real world compared to what happens in the cults and in Scientology with the child neglect and basically child abandonment, if we're really being honest.
Right.
That's what kind of consequences is that going to have? Well, it's had the consequences it's had on 2 or 3 generations of Sea Org kids. This is this is kind of a big deal. And it was just that all parents are like that. And from the parents' perspective, by the way, I wanted to throw this out, is to remind everybody, because people can and should look to the parents as like, what the hell? But think about from the parents' point of view, Scientology, remember, it's a totalist system. It expects everything from you. It wants a complete commitment. And from the parents, that means the kids are a distraction. And that's how
Right.
Scientology will actually talk about them.
Mm.
Oh, those are your kids distracting you from the bridge? Are they distracting you from your job? My parents, I grew up in Pasadena Mission before it became an org, sleeping under the desks, being carried at home at night, right, by my parents who were on post. I couldn't go talk to them. I couldn't go see them. This was nights, this was weekends. And then
Mhm.
and I'm not seeing them during the day because they're working.
Wow.
And this was me growing up, right? And so I'm not trying to put myself out of some sub story. I'm just saying I can speak from personal experience to the exact phenomena of this, and it's very, very real. Yeah, I don't know if I want to. There was the other article. I was really, really, really impressed by this Faith for Sale, Charlie Nairn, this documentary. I didn't know there were two.
Yeah.
You want to talk about this whole Charlie Nairn and
Yeah,
this article?
this was fun for me. It actually
Yeah.
started a little mistake. I still need to go back and fix that previous one. But one of my readers specializes in digging up old newspaper clippings, and he found a set that I hadn't seen before. They were pretty cool, and they were from the London in the '60s. And of course, in the mid to late '60s, Scientology became very controversial in England. Hubbard had a lot of people coming from Australia and South Africa and the United States to East Grinstead in the late '60s, and the English government wasn't happy about it. So there was a real controversy then, and that's when Charlie Nairn, with Granada TV and the show World in Action, decided to make documentaries about Scientology and Hubbard. The news, particular news clipping I had, said that the program had been delayed because of a court injunction. Well, I hadn't heard that. So I just thought that was interesting. And I assumed they were talking about The Shrinking World of L. Ron Hubbard, which is the famous documentary with Hubbard on the ship, and everybody always remarks about his teeth. And I got an email from Charlie saying, "No, Tony, no. It wasn't The Shrinking World of Scientology that got Shrinking World of L. Ron Hubbard that got delayed by an injunction. It was the previous one we did, A Faith for Sale." And I was so glad he reached out to me. I gave him a call. We had a nice talk about it. And so this is the follow-up story where we talked about yeah, they had made this. He was saying that at the time in '67, he said there was just something in the air about mental health and all these new approaches.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was this group from America called Scientologists that said they had the whole new approach to mental health. And we decided to look into it and realize, no, they're selling a church. It's not really a science, mental health. So they made A Faith for Sale. They wanted to show what that, sort of product was like. And yes, Scientology was really unhappy with it. They came in with a court injunction, and Charlie said they just got completely obliterated in court.
Yeah.
And so the show aired, and it just made them more, the court injunction and everything just made them even more curious about this Hubbard guy. And so then Charlie went down on a tip, heard that he was in Tunisia, I think, and that's when they caught up with the ship. Now, so I have published this excerpt before. This is from Steve Kinane's book, Fair Game. He interviewed Charlie, and Charlie gave him this wonderful account of what it was like. He went down to the dock in Tunisia and found the Apollo and at the dock, and it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and he just boldly went on the ship and encountered Hubbard alone. And he said it was because he thinks it was because it was the middle of the night. There were nobody else around. Hubbard was very candid. And this is what Steve published in his book. And it blew me away. And so, like I said, I've published this before, but I thought, here's another excuse to do it. It's as long as we're talking about Charlie Nairn and his documentaries. And, it's just this amazing account where he said that Hubbard was alone and candid, and he asked him some questions that Hubbard really hadn't been asked before. And Hubbard described Scientology as sort of a con that had gotten out of control, and now he was sort of trapped by his own con because so many of these people were believing him, and he was like, I can't stop, I can't give up at this point, and he was sort of trapped by it. And yeah, I mean that's something I've known about for several years, and that, like I said, Canaan published, and I just, it's a wonderful image of Hubbard as the con man trapped by his own con, and that kind of threw you for a loop, did it?
A little bit, yeah, it did. I look, it's a very detailed anecdote, right? With very clear quotes and details. And so I can't sit here and say, okay, Charlie, you're just a great big fat liar, right? But it's like, my God, are you really kidding me right now? You just walk onto this guy's boat, a total stranger. You're a media personality. This is 1968 or 9. And I'm gonna believe that Hubbard just gave up just told you everything. It's so hard for me to wrap my wits around. Yeah,
Chris, because
yeah.
I came to you previously about this
Yep.
because there's a lecture Hubbard's giving in, I can't remember I don't know if it was 57 or something.
Mm.
And he, at some point, he just looks at the audience and says, I don't really expect any of you to believe this stuff
Yeah.
about 76 trillion years and thetans and all that.
Yeah.
It's like this bizarre moment where he suddenly like drops the mask
Yeah.
and admits that the whole thing's bullshit.
Yeah.
And another journalist had noticed that and had put it in a story, I think, in the New Yorker. And I saw that and I was like, wow, I didn't realize. And I went, and sure enough, that quote's there. And I came to you because I thought, let's figure this out. Why would Hubbard do that? Because it's similar. It's kind of similar to what he did with Charlie Nairn. And you and Mike Rinder and I think some others all agreed that this was Hubbard testing people, and that one of the things that was so effective about him was that, especially in those 50s and 60s lectures, is he always gave you the feeling that you were rediscovering and confirming what he had discovered. In other words, he was never just saying you need to believe this. It was always like, he had a clever way of making it feel like you yourself had discovered these secrets with his help. And and he was saying, don't believe me, don't believe, it's all there. So I think that's an interesting parallel where he had done it to his own followers, and then Charlie Nairn is saying he had done it for him, and just sort of like dropped the mask and said, yeah, I'm just, this is a great way to make money.
Yeah, I know. I have complicated feelings about it, because I think Hubbard was messing with his followers a little bit with that earlier quote, in that sometimes you are leading people along and then you give them an illusion of choice. Of course, this is all just up to you to decide whether you're going to believe this or not, right? And the person's already hooked. So it actually kind of is a way, it's a little bit of like a re-upping or a recommitment. It's like, oh, no, I absolutely believe you, Ron. No, there's no way this isn't true. And so, he gets them even harder by trying to push them away. It's a little psychological mechanism, I think, at play there. And I see his talk with Charlie slightly differently, but at the same time, I can think through scenarios in my mind that make it make sense. I'm not saying it couldn't have happened. I just am so surprised. You know what I mean? It's just one of those moments of like, he did what? He said what? You almost can't believe it. But at the same time, I have to always be open to anything, for one, as a critical thinker, and two, 68 and 69 was probably 1967 to 69 were probably Hubbard's most stressful years in some ways. Having lost the tax exemption, having taken to the high seas, having started this group with no concept whatsoever of where it was going to go, called the Sea Org, and all these people who have no idea what the hell they're doing, and Hubbard's just continually whipping and whipping and whipping on them, and making them push peanuts down the deck with their noses.
Wasn't that also about the time of the Australian inquiry, which was really, really stressful for him?
That's right. And at the same time that this is going down, they're banned in the UK. Hubbard was literally not allowed to come back in the country. He would have been arrested on sight. Scientologists were banned from going into the UK. There were people in the article cited as, being put in jail for a day or two, right? Because they showed up to do Scientology services. And you're like, Jesus, could you imagine them trying to get away with that today? My God, like, it's pretty authoritarian on the UK's part, to be honest. It's like a little bit heavy-handed, but it was interesting to me also in looking at the articles from the time that newspaper source that opened up.
Right.
Scientology just was called a cult straight up in the press, right?
Right.
They even did a whole article highlighting their goofy jargon and the fact they have a dictionary. And they tried to ban it. So a lot of very interesting history during that time. So if there was a time when I imagine Hubbard could have been stressed out enough to want to open up to somebody, sure, I could see it actually. So, what are you going to say? It's all very interesting.
You're skeptical. I think on Charlie's behalf, he made some very good documentaries. He's clearly a serious news guy. So, and he talks about how he regrets that he wasn't recording at that time, and he had to come back and get a crew. By that time, Hubbard was no longer alone, and so he couldn't be as candid. So
that's right.
It's one of those things like, do you believe Charlie or not? And I tend to believe that happened, but
I can
understand why people would be.
I can't call the guy a liar. And also, of course, that Faith for Sale documentary was interesting. It was really interesting the way they edited it. But at first I was kind of like, oh, these look like some editing tricks. But then I started, then I'm watching it. And I'm like, oh no, they're actually capturing the culture and spirit of St. Hill in the 60s quite well. All the crazy, and it's a little bit hysterical. It's a little bit like you get this little gleam in their eyes. You can see there's something a little off with all these very happy, smiling Scientologists. You could almost call Faith for Sale shiny, happy people, except that title's already taken for the Duggar thing. I just thought it was really cool to see and to see, by the way, video footage in that film of the lecture space where L. Ron Hubbard would give all of his briefing course lectures. It was in that film, and I was really surprised at how tiny the space was. I'd never seen it. I've not been there, and I've heard hundreds of lectures out of that room without ever having seen the space fully. So that was kind of interesting. And so I recommend people watch that thing. I'd never even heard of it before. So
great.
Yeah, that was cool. And we are the largest mental health organization in the world and probably the last free people on earth. That was an L. Ron Hubbard quote from that time period, right? He was claiming they were recruiting 32 people a day in South Africa. Yeah, right. Thanks, Ron. I doubt it. All right. Well, those were some of the things I wanted to go over with you this last week because just from a historical perspective and then the current situation with Austin opening up, we'll see what other orgs they're going to open up. It's interesting. The last one they did was Santa Barbara. That was my old place. It's been a while since they've opened up anything.
But that was in Ventura, right?
Yeah.
And it was
they moved it
February 2020, right before the pandemic started, I think.
It's been that long. Wow.
Yeah. So,
wow.
But I still haven't seen anything in Chicago. We haven't seen any film permits taken out, and no change on the building.
Right.
So,
and isn't Philly still like completely going nowhere as their ideal org?
I haven't seen much in the way of fundraising there.
Yeah.
But there's been, we've seen a lot in Canada for some reason, and Battle Creek and Hawaii, but
these little podunk places.
The money's still coming in. Dave's still getting the cash.
Yeah. Yeah, you've been showing those fundraiser things for months, and they just keep going on it. They have it, and I'll say, if you walk through your articles on their fundraising, you'll see their pattern is nailed. They don't change a comma anymore. They've got that down as to how to extract money by the bucketful from their people. And as corny and goofy and off the rails and nonsensical as it all looks, and it really does look nuts, it works for these people. It's bizarre.
It keeps them in line. It's part of the control,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so too. That's because Scientology, the experience of Scientology for Scientologists these days is going into the classrooms or going and getting your auditing and scheduled fundraisers. Going 2 months from now, we're doing a fundraiser. 2 months after that, we're doing a fundraiser. 2 months after that, it's like that's the Scientology life.
Doesn't sound very fun to me, Chris.
No. All right. Well, Tony, what you got for us coming up this next week? Any previews of anything exciting?
No, I can't tell you anything.
Okay. All right. Then we will wait with bated breath.
All right, man.
All right, everybody. Thanks, Tony, for coming around and helping me with this.
You bet.
All right, folks out there, sign up for Tony's Substack if you have not already. You will get daily notifications on Scientology stories, which will be of interest to you. You can see his Substack address right there on the screen. And of course, sign up for this channel and support what both of us are doing, because we're good people and we deserve your help. So that being said, we'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.